Have you ever received a phone call that sounded calm, but felt wrong in your bones the moment you answered? This story isn't about grief. It's about a lie told too quickly, and a truth that refused to stay buried. If stories about family, trust, and quiet betrayal matter to you, subscribe to the channel. These aren't loud stories, they're the kind that stay with you. And before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. The call came before sunrise. I remember that because the kitchen window was still black. No birds. No traffic. Just silence, the kind that makes a ringing phone sound louder than it should. "It's me," my brother said. His voice was steady. Too steady. "I have bad news," he continued. "Mom passed away last night." The words landed, but they didn't settle. I sat down hard at the table, gripping the edge like it might move. My mother had been in a care facility, yes. Older, yes. But gone. No hospital call. No nurse. No doctor. "I'm sorry," he added quickly. "I've already taken care of everything." Everything. Funeral arrangements. Paperwork. The house. He listed it all in one breath, like he'd rehearsed it. "She made me power of attorney months ago," he said. "It was easier this way." Easier for who? I asked where she was. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough to notice. "She declined fast," he said. "Dementia. You know how it goes." I didn't know how it goes. And this didn't sound like it. After we hung up, I sat there holding my phone, waiting for the grief to arrive. It didn't. What came instead was something colder. Suspicion. So I did the only thing grief hadn't taken from me yet. I called the nursing home. The receptionist put me on hold. Music played, cheerful, inappropriate. When she came back, her voice carried confusion. "Your mother?" she asked. "She's resting. Would you like to speak with the nurse?" My heart stopped. "I was told she passed away," I said carefully. Silence. Then, "No, sir. She's alive." Alive. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I hung up and stared at the wall while the house felt suddenly too small to breathe in. Either someone had made an unforgivable mistake, or my brother had lied about the one thing you never lie about. I drove to the facility that afternoon. My mother was there. Sitting by the window. Eyes open. Breathing. Alive. But something was wrong. She looked dulled. Slower. Like her thoughts were moving through fog. Her voice was soft when she spoke, as if it had to travel a long way to reach me. The nurse explained there had been recent changes. New medications. New permissions. New authorizations. All signed by my brother. As I sat beside her, holding her hand, one thought wouldn't leave my mind. If my brother was willing to declare our mother dead, what else had he already erased? And that was the moment I stopped grieving and started paying attention. Sometimes the lie comes before the loss. Have you ever looked at someone you love and felt that the story being told about them didn't match the person sitting right in front of you? That feeling stayed with me as I sat beside my mother. She smiled when she saw me, the same careful smile she'd always worn. She asked about my drive. About the weather. About whether I'd eaten. These weren't the words of someone who had slipped away overnight. But the nurse spoke differently. "She's been declining," she said quietly. "Confusion. Memory issues. The doctor adjusted her medication." "Recently?" I asked. She nodded. "Over the last few months." That timing bothered me. 3 months earlier, my mother had called to complain about a noisy neighbor and a crossword puzzle she was convinced had a misprinted clue. She'd been sharp enough to argue. Detailed enough to remember names, dates, and grudges that went back decades. Now I was being told the decline had been sudden and serious. I asked to see her chart. The nurse hesitated, then explained that all decisions were being handled by my brother. Power of attorney. Full authority. "It makes things smoother," she said. "Smoother for the paperwork," Not necessarily for the person. I stayed with my mother as the afternoon passed. She was quieter than usual, slower to respond. But when the nurse left the room, something changed. Her eyes sharpened. "Your brother's been busy," she said softly. I leaned closer. "What do you mean?" She glanced toward the door. "He doesn't like questions." Neither do people with something to hide. The doctor came in later, polite, professional, careful with his words. He explained the diagnosis in measured terms. Cognitive impairment. Early stage dementia. Best to keep things calm. Best to limit stimulation. "Medication can do that," I said. "Calm someone down." He paused. Just for a moment. "Sometimes." I asked which medications had been added, and when. He answered, but his eyes flicked to the chart before meeting mine again. That night I stayed late. My mother slept peacefully. Too peacefully. In the car, I looked up the medications on my phone. Drowsiness. Confusion. Emotional flattening. Suppression. The next morning I arrived early, before the medication rounds. My mother was clearer. More present. She squeezed my hand. "Don't let him rush things," she whispered. "He's always in a hurry when there's something to gain." I asked if she remembered signing the power of attorney. She closed her eyes. "I remember being tired," she said. "I remember being told it was temporary. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent when no one checks." I asked the administrator for copies of the paperwork. She explained politely that I'd need my brother's approval. I thanked her and left. Sitting in my car, I opened a notebook and wrote 4 words. Doctor. Medication. Money. Property. Grief had stepped aside. Something colder, and clearer, had taken its place. Because if my brother was willing to tell me our mother was dead, then the diagnosis might just be the next line meant to make everything easier. For him. Have you ever noticed how the truth gets quieter right before it's exposed? That's where I was now. Past the shock. Past the disbelief. Standing in that narrow space where facts either line up, or everything falls apart. So I started with the simplest question. What had changed? My mother's routines hadn't shifted on their own. Someone had shifted them for her. I took a day off work and started making calls. Not angry ones. Careful ones. The kind that sound harmless, until you know what to listen for. The bank was first. I didn't accuse anyone. I just asked for confirmation. Account access. Recent activity. Anything unusual. The woman on the line hesitated. "I'm sorry," she said. "You're not listed as an authorized contact." "Who is?" I asked. "Your brother," she replied. "Under power of attorney." That part didn't surprise me. The transfers did. Small at first. Regular. Then larger. Cleanly timed around the same dates my mother's medication had been adjusted. Rent payments from a property I didn't recognize. A recurring line item labeled administrative fees. Administrative for what? I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady. My chest was not. Next, I drove to the county records office. My mother had owned her house outright for years. She'd been proud of that. Said it was the one thing no one could ever take from her. The clerk typed for a moment. Then she said, "The property was sold 6 weeks ago." Sold. I didn't speak right away. "To whom?" I finally asked. She turned the screen slightly. "An LLC." I wrote the name down. It meant nothing to me. Shell companies rarely do. By lunchtime, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Money moving out. Assets changing hands. Decisions made quickly and quietly, all under the language of care. That afternoon, I went back to the nursing facility. My mother was sitting in the common room, staring at a television that wasn't even on. When she saw me, something crossed her face. Relief. Or warning. "They moved my things," she whispered before I sat down. "My papers." "Which papers?" I asked. The ones with the blue edges, she said. He said they were outdated. Blue edges. That's how she described the trust documents she'd updated after my father died. The ones meant to protect her if anyone ever rushed her. I asked if she'd signed anything recently. She nodded slowly. He said it was to help with the doctors, she said. He said I was getting confused. That word again. That evening, I met with a private investigator a friend had used years earlier. No drama. No promises. Just careful questions. When I showed him the LLC name, his expression changed. That's not random, he said. Give me a day. The next morning, he called. It traces back to your brother, he said. Indirectly. Clean enough that he probably thought no one would look. As he spoke, my phone buzzed. A message from the nursing facility. Your mother is not in her room. My heart dropped. I called immediately. She was signed out earlier, the nurse said. Your brother picked her up. For what? I asked. There was a pause. He said it was time to start planning. I hung up slowly. Because I finally understood what this had been building toward. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about control. And for the first time since this began, fear arrived, not for what had already been taken, but for what my brother was about to finish. Have you ever braced yourself for the worst, only to realize the truth was far more deliberate than you imagined? I found my mother that evening in a small side room off the facility's garden. Not her room. Not the common area. Somewhere quiet. Intentional. She was sitting upright, her coat folded neatly beside her. Her eyes were sharp, clear in a way I hadn't seen all week. You took your time, she said. I stopped just inside the doorway. They said you were taken? She waved it off. I let him think that. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The woman in front of me didn't look confused. She didn't look medicated. She looked composed. You're okay? I asked. She nodded. As okay as someone pretending to be forgetful can be. My heart started pounding. Pretending? She leaned forward slightly. Your brother started hovering months ago. Asking about accounts. Papers. What would happen if I needed help? I thought about the Blue Edge documents. The trust. I didn't like the questions, she continued. So I told him I was getting foggy. Missed details on purpose. I wanted to see what he'd do if he thought I wasn't watching. I swallowed. What he did was tell me you were dead. Her jaw tightened. Then he moved faster than I expected. She explained everything calmly. How she'd updated the trust years ago. How it required 2 independent confirmations for major transfers. How the documents he'd taken were copies. I allowed the medication changes briefly, she said. Just long enough to confirm intent. Then she shook her head. I refused them when staff weren't present. They think I'm compliant, she added. I'm observant. Anger and relief collided in my chest. He sold the house, I said. She nodded. I know. Or tried to. Tried? The trust reverts if assets are moved under false medical pretenses, she said. I documented everything. Dates. Names. Prescriptions. I stared at her. Why didn't you tell me? She reached for my hand. Because I needed him to believe he was winning. That's when I understood. She hadn't been disappearing. She'd been waiting. He signed me out today, she added. Said we needed to start planning. Planning what? He thinks a funeral announcement will settle things. I felt my stomach drop. A funeral, for a living woman. She smiled faintly. Exactly. We planned the next steps quietly. No confrontations. No warnings. The investigator would finish his report. The facility would be notified, formally, about the medication and POA abuse. The attorney would be ready. And the funeral? I asked. She looked at me steadily. Let him plan it. I left the facility that night with something I hadn't felt since this began. Not fear. Not grief. Certainty. Because my brother hadn't made a mistake. He'd made a choice. And soon, he would have to explain it. In a room full of people who believed they were there to say goodbye. Sometimes the sharpest mind in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Have you ever watched someone build a stage for a lie so carefully that they forget the truth might walk on it? The announcement went out 2 days later. A short notice. Polite wording. Celebration of life. My brother's name listed as the contact. No mention of illness details. No hospital. No dates. Just certainty, delivered with confidence. I stared at the message longer than I should have, not because I doubted it, but because part of me couldn't believe how easily he'd crossed that line. He chose a small chapel near the edge of town. Neutral. Respectable. Easy parking. The kind of place people accept without asking too many questions. I recognized the strategy immediately. People arrived early, voices low, eyes soft with practiced sympathy. Some hugged me when they saw me, surprised I'd come. Others avoided my gaze entirely. Grief makes people cautious. It also makes them easy to guide. My brother stood near the front, composed, black suit pressed, expression rehearsed. He shook hands, accepted condolences, nodded at the right moments. Watching him do it made my stomach tighten, not with anger, but with the realization that he practiced this version of himself. I took a seat halfway back with the investigator beside me and an envelope resting on my lap. Inside were copies, nothing original. Dates. Transfers. Authorizations. Medical notes. Enough to ask questions. Not enough to warn. I remember thinking, if I stand up too soon, they'll miss it. The service began on time. Soft music. Carefully chosen words about legacy and family. My brother spoke briefly at first, how sudden it had been, how hard decisions were made, how grateful he was to everyone for coming. Then he lingered. He began to talk about responsibility. About stepping up. About honoring wishes. He mentioned being entrusted with things, finances, arrangements, the future. A quiet claim. I felt something settle in my chest, not fear, not doubt, but certainty. I waited. When he finished, the officiant invited anyone else who wished to speak. No one moved. I stood. The sound of the pews shifting beneath me felt louder than it should have. For a moment, I was aware of everything, the room, the air, the way my hands felt too steady for what was coming. I won't be long, I said calmly. I just want to clarify something. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated. My mother asked me to share that she's always believed truth matters, especially when it's inconvenient. A murmur moved through the room. And because of that, I continued, she wanted to be present when certain questions were answered. The doors at the back opened. She walked in slowly. Upright. Composed. Coat buttoned neatly. Eyes clear. For a split second, I forgot to breathe. The sound that followed wasn't loud. It was a collective intake of breath, the kind people make when reality corrects them all at once. My brother turned white. She walked down the aisle and stopped beside him. Looked at the chapel. The flowers. The programs. Thank you for arranging this, she said evenly. It's good to see who came. Silence pressed in from every direction. She faced him then. You told people I was gone, she said. You sold my home. You altered my care. You moved my money. He stammered, reaching for words that no longer fit. You're confused. This isn't. She raised her hand. Not angry. Final. Enough. 2 uniformed officers stepped forward from the side aisle. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just present. I stayed where I was. Not because I was afraid, but because there was nothing left to prove. The officiant quietly stepped away. My mother turned to the room one last time. I'm not here for revenge, she said. I'm here for the truth. As my brother was escorted out, I felt something release inside me, not triumph, not satisfaction. Relief. The kind that comes when you realize you're no longer carrying someone else's secret. Because lies can carry a person far, but they cannot carry them through daylight. When the truth arrives, it doesn't need permission. Have you ever noticed how quiet life becomes after the truth finally lands? Not peaceful at first. Just honest. The days after the funeral that didn't explode the way people expect justice to. That surprised many of them. There were no confrontations in parking lots. No statements released. No explanations posted online. Just process. Slow. Careful. Unavoidable. Exactly the way my mother wanted it. Once everything was exposed, the system did what systems do when they're forced to look closely. Medical records were reviewed. Financial transfers were traced and reversed. The power of attorney was suspended, then formally revoked. The doctor who had approved the medication changes was placed under review. Nothing dramatic. No spectacle. Just consequences, delivered one signature at a time. My brother stopped calling. I thought that silence would feel heavy. I thought it might ache or linger. Instead, it felt accurate. Within a week, my mother left the facility. Not to return to the old house. That chapter had already closed, but to a small place near me. A place with sunlight and a modest garden. Neighbors who learned her name. A kitchen she could move through on her own terms. She chose the furniture herself. Labeled every drawer. Laughed more than I'd heard her laugh in years. One afternoon, we sat on the porch watching the sun slip behind the trees. She was quiet for a long moment, then said something I still carry with me. I needed to know, she said. Who would protect me when there was nothing left to gain? I didn't answer right away. Because I had needed to know something too. That love isn't proven by documents. That loyalty doesn't require inheritance. And that family isn't the person who moves fastest when they think no one's watching. The legal side wrapped up quietly. My brother faced charges, not the kind that make headlines, but the kind that follow you for life. Trust violations. Fraud. Abuse of authority. The words sounded clinical. The consequences were not. People in town talked for a while. Stories always spread. Some softened. Some avoided us altogether. A few apologized for things they hadn't realized they were part of. We didn't correct them. We didn't need to. My mother began volunteering with an advocacy group for seniors navigating care decisions. She spoke plainly. No bitterness. Just experience. People listened. As for me, I returned to my routines. Work. Morning coffee. Weekend errands. But something fundamental had shifted. I no longer rushed to fill silence. I no longer carried responsibility for other people's comfort. And I no longer confused access with love. Months later, my mother asked me if I ever regretted how things unfolded. I thought carefully before answering. No, I said. I regret that it had to be tested. But not that it was. She nodded, satisfied. Because in the end, what we protected wasn't money. It wasn't property. It wasn't pride. It was dignity. And dignity, once defended, has a way of rebuilding everything else around it. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever had to step in quietly to protect someone you love, or wondered who would do the same for you, know this. You're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, about family, aging, and the moments that reveal who truly stands with us, consider subscribing. Because real family doesn't rush to inherit. They stay.